Yeah, the feet to meter thing is hard, but then I've never been a big fan of feet and inches.
No, it's stupid. It's Fahrenheit is better than Celsius. Fahrenheit wins. That's the only sort of, I don't know why we call feet and inches imperial when don't the Brits also use meters? But anyway, yes, meters far superior. Everything's super logical.
What does an inch break down to? It's sixteenths?
Sixteenths, yeah.
I mean, come on.
But this is also why evolution screwed us by only giving us 5 fingers per hand. Because if we had 6 fingers per hand, then we'd have counted in base 12. And base 12 is so much more logical than base 10. Base 10's divisors are 2.5, 5, 7.5, and 10, versus base 12, your divisors are 3, 4, and 6. It's really logical in base 12, and we're screwed because most likely the reason we all count in base 10 is because we have 5 digits per hand.
So you're saying evolution cheated us because it doesn't work with inches and feet?
No, I'm saying the other direction is evolution cheated us because we use base 10 is just goofy and illogical. You have to learn fractions way too soon versus when everything is 12, like that is the one good side of 12 is a good number. 12 is the number on our clocks. 12 is the number of our months. 12 is a good number and really helpful in ways. Quarters is really easy. It's just 3 months. Like imagine if you had to do quarters and we only had 10 months. You'd have 2.5 months. It'd be weird.
Yeah, but I just fixed it for you because drop the thumbs and then use 1 foot.
It's 1 foot. What?
Because don't use the big toe. That is the thumb of the foot. So that's your 12, right? Because you do have an extra 10 digits to play with. And if you drop the thumb of the feet, which is the big toe, now you've got your 12 and 16. 4, 4,
No.
4, and 4. Yeah, dude, totally,
No.
totally. 16. And actually, that works with the inches too now because an inch is 16. So if I go into Home Depot, stick out the toes I need, stick out the toes I need. There we go.
But that's the ridiculousness of the imperial system is inches are subdivided by 16, feet are subdivided by 12, and then we jump all the way, well, yards is 3, and then we jump all the way to a mile.
1 foot, 2 hands, there's your foot, there's your inches. I'm just saying, like, you just got to give the signal. You got to, like, look down for the rest.
Super helpful on an audio format. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human element. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems. I can't think of two better people than Kevin and I to get into it.
Yep, they are stuck with us. This is going to be a recurring and random episode that we drop from time to time where we look at a few news items that have come out this week. It's going to be a grab bag episode.
Yeah, I like that. Grab bag, grab bag. What's the origin of grab bag?
Yeah, I don't know what the origin of grab bag is. I was also trying to think of like what's a term, because all of my dumb little segment names like user stories and market analysis, they're from the world of product and engineering. I'm trying to think of what do you call random, I don't know what you call breaking news, randomness, things that you just want to randomly talk about. Is there a term for that in engineering and product? No, I think we're just going to call it, I don't know, we'll have to figure out what the name of this series of random episodes that we drop is.
Ooh, maybe we should make that a competition for our listeners. Let them name it.
Name the segment. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We don't have a cringe little segment name for this. We're just going to talk about a few news stories that came out recently and see where the conversation takes us. So the first one is news out of the European Union. Apple was forced to make changes to its App Store thanks to a new regulation in the EU that's going to take effect in March. Due to the rules that they've rolled out, Apple's going to have to make a couple of changes. One of them is they're going to have to be allowed to add third-party app stores. So right now, if you want to install an app on your iPhone, you have to go through the Apple Store. It's that you can't use anything else. And that's technically true, I think, of Android phones, isn't it? I suppose you're not quite jailbreaking your phone, but you can install a local app directly if you want to, but you mostly have to go through the Play Store. Anyway.
I mostly go through the Play Store for things, but one of the reasons why I've been on Android is that I can go get APK if I want to.
And I think there is an interesting, anyone who's been around long enough remembers the days of Windows XP and earlier in which software wasn't signed, anything could be installed. That's where most of your security breaches came from. And there's an understandable reason why Steve Jobs, when he rolled out the iPhone, originally didn't include an app store. And then when he did include an app store, he included just the one that Apple had full control over to audit every single thing that your apps are doing. There is a security thing here, and I will be curious to see how much control Apple is still able to have over those other app stores and the requirements that those stores are going to have to allow you to install anything, because there's a reason why viruses are a whole thing in the Windows ecosystem in a way that they are less so in systems that have controlled installations like this. So I think it's good in general because Apple has too much control over that ecosystem, but I will be curious to see what happens as security is an understandable part of that.
I got to assume they're not going to leave that open though, right? Like there's got to be, according to this article on The Verge, right? It says Apple still plans to keep a close eye on the app distribution process. All apps must be notarized by Apple, and distribution through third-party marketplaces is still managed by Apple's systems.
Interesting. Okay, so that's more clear than what article I was looking at, BBC or something.
There's still going to be safeguards.
Sure.
There's still going to be safeguards in place from Apple's point of view.
I'd be curious what controls you can put in place. And if you're a government agency like the EU, that's where things like this get really tricky to legislate, because you're not going to legislate code. You can legislate standards, but even, I don't know, this is a fun little intersection of governments should want to ensure the safety and flexibility and openness of markets, but also security is a thing.
It's I always find the whole subject a little bit, it's very contradictory too. It's such a, like, I always think of the European Union as being much more forceful of privacy concerns than the US. We're generally a little bit behind. Like Sarbanes-Oxley, we sort of did it, right? And we
Right.
sort of didn't. GDPR.
Right, GDPR, right, yeah.
We sort of do it, but still a lot of companies, and oftentimes I'm working, with IT guys, and you sort of talk about GDPR and the ultimate penalty you can pay. And I think people genuinely believe that'll never happen to us, right? Like even if we get caught,
Right.
we're not going to get handed the kind of fines you're talking about.
Well, and then business steps in and introduce like Safe Harbor, which is the cheat code to allow you to have US businesses do stuff. And it gets really weird. I mean, the reason why we all just ignore the accept cookies button and everyone just clicks accept is because of good intentions by regulators trying to help with privacy. The workaround is because they couldn't legislate the workaround. And it's, I don't know, it gets really tricky really quickly.
It's funny you brought the cookies example. I was actually wondering at some point, it was like, should we tell people what that means? And then I was like, no, because you start to scare people, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm not going to accept any, right? I feel like that genuinely is once I've made my mind up, I'm always going to click this. Like there is
Right.
nobody's really been like, oh, okay, let me go see what this actually means. But it's weird in the sense that with Apple, because it's the European Union, which I would have thought would be much more strict. But I guess in a way they're saying, we don't care how you manage the privacy and security still. You still have to do that, but we're going to make you we're going to change the parameters that allow you to control how secure and privacy. So it's weird to me.
So then the next thing that they're required to do, which I think I don't know if we'll ever release the part of the conversation we had about the history of Windows and Internet Explorer, but Apple will be forced on the iPhone in Europe to, as soon as you try to go and browse the web, it'll be prompting the user to pick the browser that they'd like to use, since right now you have to use Safari. It's not totally true. Right now you can, I believe, install Chrome and other browsers. And so I'm wondering that one, this is going to allow the user to recognize that there are other browsers that they could use. Two, what wasn't clear, maybe I need to go read the Verge article instead. What wasn't clear is just because you allow somebody to pick Chrome or Firefox or Opera or whatever other browser there was still a requirement. Even Chrome today on iOS uses the Safari rendering engine. The benefit you're getting out of Chrome is all of the wrapper around the rendering. You're getting your bookmarks and all of the features, but the actual rendering is still Safari. And I'd be curious if that has been alleviated, or this is simply a competitive thing to make sure people are going to understand that there's choices out there other than Safari, which the reason I say that that's ironic based on history of the 90s and the early 2000s is because that is exactly what Microsoft was forced to do in Windows XP after the antitrust ruling in the early 2000s, is they were forced to allow people to recognize that IE couldn't be the only browser, that they could install other browsers and you could make that the default within the OS. And Apple was one of the companies that benefited from that because they had Safari for Windows. So turnabout is fair play. Welcome to being a monopoly power. And by the way, you all did the exact thing you hated Microsoft for doing, welcome to, the find out phase of fuck around and find out.
Karma, I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I've always had mixed feelings on this one. I'm like, the choose your browser option seems that sounds like a step too far for me. I feel like if I'm Apple or I'm Microsoft, the fact that I have a default browser on installation is fair enough, and the user can choose to educate themselves enough to go and install an alternative browser and change the default browser. Choose your browser option to me feels like, I don't know, it's too far. I'm on the side of Apple and Microsoft in give them a default browser, and if they want to change it, they can change it. But I shouldn't have to ask them to choose the default browser.
I think this is remediation for the fact that you couldn't set a default. And so even if you knew that you wanted to go and install Chrome, sometimes Safari would still open depending on what would happen. It was the same thing in Windows. Sometimes even though you chose to install Chrome and you as a user could choose to go open Chrome, Kevin from the future just popping in to say, I meant to say Firefox. Chrome wasn't around at the time of this issue, so Firefox, that's what I meant, Firefox. Should I just edit Firefox in over the word Chrome? I'm not that good of an audio editor yet. Anyway, back to the episode. If you clicked on a link in Outlook, if you clicked on a link in the help docs, those opened in Internet Explorer, and so they had to add the ability to default. That's why now when you install a browser, it asks you, do you want me to set Firefox as the default? Now, to your point, if I'm a user who knows to go and install Firefox, then I've done that. I think this is punitive. This is basically saying, because you knew that was a bad thing that you were doing, our remedy is to punish you and force you to advertise other browsers. Had you done the right thing from the start, maybe you wouldn't have had to do this screen in the first place.
Okay, I can see that. Shame on you. Shame on you, Apple. Take your medicine.
So then the other part of this, and it's not totally clear how effective or compliant this is, but they currently charge app developers 30% of any transactions that happen in the apps, which is why you've seen things like Amazon pulled the original version of the Kindle app where you could buy a book in the Kindle app. Apple wanted Amazon to pay them 30% of those transactions for doing it through the iPhone, and a bunch of companies said no. Like a bunch of newspapers were expected to pay Apple 30% of their subscription fees because they were going to have news coming through their news app. And so a bunch of companies said no. That's why a bunch of things have to happen through your desktop browser or through the browser, not through the app. But a bunch of companies said, fine, we wouldn't exist if we weren't able to take advantage of just sort of one-click transaction. I can subscribe and sign up directly through the store and I still get enough revenue. That's fine. So it wasn't a total turnoff for everybody, but the EU came and said, no, that's ridiculous. 30% is insane. You're providing an ecosystem. You get money from the people paying for the phone. You get money from some part of this, but you don't deserve 30%, which is, to me, was always insane. And for a while, Android had a major selling point, which is Google didn't take that percentage. In the past couple of years, Google has also started to take percentage of transactions if you're in the App Store or the Play Store, which is ridiculous. But anyway, so now Apple's being forced to cut the transaction fee from 30% to 17%. I have no idea why they ended up at that 17% number, and I'll be curious how that mollifies the EU regulators if it does. There's also a tier of people who are currently paying 15%, and they're only getting cut down to 10%. And Apple's excuse is, well, only 3% of developers in the EU pay the Apple standard 30% commission, and 9% pay that discounted rate. So it's not that much, and nobody will really notice. And there's two parts of that, which is, no, it's because a bunch of people weren't paying you the 30% in the first place because you had such high rates. You claiming that no one was willing to pay my high rate, and therefore it's only 3% of app developers. And sure, you have 5 million apps in the store, which are every single, those fake games that you get ads for on Instagram that aren't actual games. There's trash in your store so that you can have the claim that of the total population in the app store, only 3% pay for this. Sure, but the 3% is a significant portion of the major apps that most people use.
And it was Epic Games, right?
The Fortnite creators, yeah.
Yeah, the guys who built Fortnite, they got thrown out of the store, right? Back in like 2020.
Yeah, and then they sued Apple for that.
They sued Apple because they sort of got around the 30%
right
transaction fee by setting up their own in-game currency, right?
Which is brilliant, but also stupid. If you're a consumer, it's incredibly dumb. I should pay one company that I trust to encrypt my credit card information, and then a phone is there's a reason phones are your two-factor devices. It's a pretty good method of controlling it. It'd be nice if Apple Wallet, or whatever they call their little thing, it'd be nice if I could take advantage of that, and that Fortnite could just just use that transaction. I didn't have to have 17 different companies all having my credit card information. There's a reason that I really like the Chrome feature. Well, Chrome will ping your bank and get a temporary internet card number so that every site I go to gets a different credit card number. So if they get hacked, I don't get screwed. There's some niceties about having centralized payment authorities, and the fact that Epic had to go and do that is incredibly dumb. Smart, but dumb.
It's interesting because I know Epic kind of sort of lost that fight, right? But I gotta imagine the guys sitting around in the office one afternoon, like, I have an idea. I think we could get around the transaction fees by doing
We're
this.
going to call them Epic coins, and they'll be worth 99 cents.
But I gotta hand it to them because they did serve. How much did that contribute to the surfacing and others sort of saying, "Hey, you know what? This is never going to get better unless we sort of take a stand, right?"
Right.
Like, hey, the guys over at Epic just they lost, but they took a stand against Apple. So yeah, I'll credit to those guys. It'd be interesting to see how much that played into some of the changes because
I'm not sure. I think most European regulations actually make sense. I don't know that I have a framework that correctly balances the crappy things corporations do against the interest and the well-being of the public. At least the EU tries. I don't know that I like what they tend to do because it's very hard to legislate technology, but at least they're trying. At least they're doing something in the interest of their people. Another interesting thing out of this is the way Apple is doing this is you can still pay us 30% and we will just let everything continue to go as normal. Or you can pay us 17% and we're going to charge you 50, what's a cent in euros? 50, half a euro for every new installation of your app over 1 million users. So sure, we gave you the discount, but also here's a new fee that we're going to introduce to punish you for using the discount. And so at some point, those economic scales probably still do go in favor of the people taking the discount, but it is Apple being a dick and coming in and saying, here's this extra thing we're going to force on you, to the point that there's a coalition it's called the Coalition for App Fairness, which is a bunch of corporations, so it's a nonsense word made to sound good for PR, but a bunch of them came together and read the thing and said basically Apple's proposal forces developers to choose either stick with the terrible status quo or opt into a new convoluted set of terms that are bad for developers and consumers alike. That was Rick Van Meter, the executive director of that Coalition for App Fairness, and he's right. It's this goofy thing that I'll be curious if the EU steps in and says no, stop it, because it is creating this weird dual track thing that Apple clearly is designing as a punishment.
so wait a minute. After 1 million users, there's a fee of 50 euros for any user after that.
Not 50 euros, half a euro for every user.
Sorry, half a euro. Yeah,
But still,
5 euros.
That's a good chunk of change for a popular app that wants to do transactions, which feels like it's just simply going to drive more people to do browser-based transactions instead. So you're driving down the adoption of your functionality, Apple.
That's what I was going to ask. So is it half a euro per transaction?
It's half a euro per installation. So if your app takes any transactions at all, that's the part that's unclear, and why I'm sure Apple is doing this, is you then need to start doing some spreadsheet math to figure out if I'm going to have 5 million installations, but only 100,000 of those are going to be doing in-app purchases. I'm maybe better off paying the 30, or is it only installs that use the... Yeah, the language that I read wasn't clear, but I'm sure the EU is going to have to look at that and step in and say, what are you doing?
So here's the thing. For years, I've had to defend myself for being an Android user, right? And not that people have come after me, but this is
why.
the reason why I'm an Android user. It's like, don't get me wrong, I use Apple products. I just don't want to be part of this mess. I don't want to have to think about it when I'm installing stuff, and I don't want to think about, and I'm not usually thinking about the transaction. I'm not usually thinking about the company I'm paying, right? Like I'm paying you money, now go away. But I feel bad for them in this instance, right? But it's that whole, I've always been Team Microsoft anyway. So even in the old days,
Which is why you're still on a Windows phone.
Okay, yeah, good point.
So that is the news out of the EU about Apple being forced to actually be a good citizen in the marketplace. Again, because capitalism only works up until a point, and then you need some controls. Unrestricted capitalism is what happens, and Apple's not a good citizen.
I'm just happy to hear that EU is still there. Is that
the EU is still a thing? You didn't realize
yeah,
that Brexit wasn't actually canceling all of the EU, it was just leaving the EU? All right, next on the list, Taylor Swift deepfakes spread across the internet, and they were explicit and not actually, a hack from her iCloud account. They were fake. They were made by AI, and it has prompted in the last couple of hours congressional calls for action for people to actually figure out what you could do to prevent this kind of stuff. I think we're recording this before the AI conversation drops, but the AI conversation might have been out there by the time people might hear this. And welcome to the AI future, my friends. It's the machine making up photos of people against their will. There were 47 million views of the images on Twitter before Twitter blocked it and had to actually ban the ability for you to search for the words Taylor Swift or Taylor AI. And I think there's a third phrase, maybe just Taylor Swift AI or something like that. So yeah, X finally had to actually say there is a limit to free speech. Welcome to the deepfake AI future. We're months away from Joe Biden deepfake eating a baby on national television and swinging all of, well, the red states aren't going to vote for Joe anyway, but it's a horrifying future. What do we do to lock this stuff down? Again, sort of like Apple and the EU, Congress can call for changes. Curious what a law looks like that can correctly handle this.
It's interesting. I just did the search on X just for Taylor Swift, by the way, for the
Sure.
listeners. It wasn't like any more than that, 2 words. And it said something went wrong, try reloading. And it does say, which is kind of interesting, something went wrong, but don't fret, it's not your fault.
Interesting.
In my case, it's not my fault, but in the people this morning, it
was
was
their
your fault.
Well, and also, great. So now I'm not sure that Taylor Swift has a ton of financial vested interest in her being searchable on X, but now you are causing material harm. There is an argument to be made that Taylor Swift's inability to be found on X is actually now a bad thing, causing her financial harm.
And again, it's definitely regional, right? Because I know in the UK, it's been illegal, I think, since 23 to distribute that material, right? Deepfake pornographic material is illegal. I think in the EU. I want to say the EU. I should check that. But
which is, I think that tends to be the way that they get around that, right? Which is the distribution is the thing that gets you on the hook, and therefore you don't have to make the technology illegal. You can make a specific use of the technology illegal, which is bonkers that we haven't done that on a bunch of things in the US.
But the old days, for our listeners who are non-technical, in the old days, instead of the deepfake culture, it would be a badly done Photoshop.
Right, her head on a swimsuit model's body.
Yeah, so it was kind of always there. It was just, I think in the mind, there's obviously motion now, right? Deepfake supports video. So that's one thing that's different. But this was always a problem. It's just the quality has changed and the medium is now includes motion picture.
And they've done stuff like revenge porn is illegal. You can't be a minor and having that kind of stuff, which has screwed kids who are sexting each other. But there are ways that people can step in and say this stuff ends. The problem is a lot of the times that's a after the fact remedy that doesn't stop it. So you then have to expect that a platform like Twitter, X, has to be able to have controls built in that prevent it from even being posted. Or is it only ever remediation? It gets posted, it gets seen by 47 million people, and then it gets taken down. Like, I know YouTube got in the way, and now YouTube has a catalog of billions of hours of music and movies, and as you upload your file to YouTube, it scans all of that to make sure you're not stealing content. At some point, there's got to be incentives why the technology is going to be built to handle this kind of stuff. So not necessarily stopping the AI from making it in the first place, though that'd be nice. You can at least stop the distribution of it.
It won't be long before listeners gather, like, I'm a no holds barred. Like, I'm full into the future with AI, right? Like, I want it all. But for me, this is a big problem. I actually think we have to start asking for more accountability from the people who reshare that stuff too. I think they should I absolutely think you should be able to go after the company that made the deep fake the minute it's distributed beyond their domain, right? Whatever their domain, whatever their medium is. The minute it goes beyond there, I think they should be accepting accountability, because I think we'd see potentially I should be able to go to an account and create deepfakes of my own, but the minute it leaves my private space, both myself and the owner of the model that allowed me to do that should be accountable.
Right, it's the same thing with child porn. Obviously, they're going to arrest you if you're trying to make it, but they're also going to arrest you if you have it and share it with other people.
Yes, but then it's different in the sense that the company where I store the pictures are not accountable, are they?
Probably not. That's probably a thing that you would have to also figure out how to include, which is why Google invests in, and I think Twitter used to, I don't know if they still do, they had the ability to scan your images and your videos and make sure that they weren't copyright infringement because money was involved. And of course, as soon as money was involved, the corporations jump at building technology to adjust that. So all you need is Taylor Swift to sue somebody, just like she sued Ticketmaster, and I'm sure something is going to come out of that. It's stupid, though, that we need to have a celebrity who is rich enough to take legal action for something like that to step in and happen. You would hope, one, the companies would want to do something ahead of the time, and two, Congress might want to get in and make some actual enforcements and say, hey, we have the record that you reshared the Taylor Swift deepfake. Here's the $30,000 fine and 6 months in prison. Not a huge fan of prison sentences in general, but some legal consequence should be part of this.
It's interesting, right? One of the most prominent examples, I think it had 45 million views and had been reposted 25,000 times. What kind of people
Right. Who are the 2,500?
are doing that?
Right.
right? 25,000.
25,000 who reposted it. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, 25,000 people reposted it. That what? Where's your standards?
Right.
Where are your standards at that point? Now, can you punish those guys? That's a weird one, right? Because I
Not now, but in the future you could. That is
in the future, yeah, but what's an appropriate punishment? Does that count as distributed? Absolutely, it should, because if any system allowed child pornography and you reposted that, to me, you're redistributing that, right? Like you are now liable.
right, absolutely. And the penalty for you in that situation is real bad.
Yeah, it's
Like
real
they made
bad.
that a very bad one for good reason.
And so, in the sense of deepfakes, where it's like it's not real.
No, it's a degree. There's a degree of it probably. It shouldn't be the same degree as child porn, but there should be consequences. And it should scare
Yeah,
you off from wanting to do it, if not only for being a good human being, there should be consequences to doing it. And also the companies should be doing something to not even allow it to happen in the first place. And that's the thing that's boggling to me is YouTube does this because money was involved. There was no ethical concern about someone posting the entirety of a movie until someone brought the money reasons into it. And so it always seems to be we need to wait for the financial incentive rather than the moral incentive. And I get that morality is not black and white for everybody or in all circumstances. This one seems like we knew it was coming. We knew it was happening. These companies had the chance to say, we're going to get out ahead of the fact that we're going to be on the hook for distributing 47 million views. I don't know. I feel like this is where you're aware of what's happening and you have a responsibility in the ecosystem. And since you're not, now the government's going to come in and probably make it worse. And good, but
yeah, it's interesting now, though, right? There's two thoughts here. One is I'm still appalled by the number of reposts, but I'm also appalled by the number of likes, right? Like
right.
I've liked some dubious things in my life, but never in this category, right? But I'm still conscious. I'm still like, there are times when I've liked something and then said, actually, I don't. Like that's too close to the line. I'm going to take my like back off. Not that anybody would really ever go scanning for
Sure.
that stuff, but I'm thinking to myself, like, I know that I like that, and I don't want to be that guy. But then people like this and they left it on. A young woman, sort of her image thrown out there into the world, and you think to yourself, oh, it's not bad, right? Because it's not really her, so I'm just gonna like it. This is kind of
Well, and
cool.
that's the thing is
Yeah,
it's like
but
I'm not going to say I guarantee, but you can just imagine the lawyer arguing, well, we made her green and we gave her horns, so it's not really Taylor Swift anymore, so she can be nude. Like there's just this weird ugly because AI is not tracking its sources and because you can't understand the provenance of where the AI decided to make this from. Like I think that has to be the legal recourse is you need to be able to trace back through the algorithm that the horns came from this copyrighted material. The thing of Taylor Swift's face is her image. Now people are going to draw Taylor Swift and get around it, but like at some point there should be some way to enforce these spurious legal arguments we're guaranteed going to face.
that's really interesting you bring that up, because the scary part for me there is, again, taking it back to the child pornography thing, right? Where they argue, yes, but it's a fully grown woman's body with a child's face. And I think to myself,
Sure.
like, is that the world we live in where someone's going to make that argument, right? To get around the law, which is scary as hell. It's also, you bring up an interesting point though, where I'm conflicted now, which is if someone had drawn Taylor Swift
Mm-hmm.
naked, then it sits differently with me, right? Because it's not that I would want to see it any more than anything else, but the legalities of that, because one starts to branch into artwork, and I'm not justifying it at all. What I'm saying is like there's almost like this weird art has this weird protective
Sure.
Kevlar vest, right? To say, well, no, it's pencil drawing, so it's like actually, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that you're a talented artist. It's still the same thing. You're still taking
Your intent matters.
your intent matters, right? Like, but
It's the, I don't remember the name, I should know the name of the Supreme Court Justice who has the famous quote, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it.
exactly right.
This is Kevin from the future, just popping in to say the name of the justice was Potter Stewart in Jacopellis versus Ohio, and the quote was, I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, he's referring to hardcore pornography, and perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it, and the motion picture involved in this case is not that. Alright, back to the episode. There's a way
Yeah.
that I and that's the problem is a technology system doesn't have, again, because I'll go back to our episode that may not have aired yet, AI isn't actually as smart as human beings.
Yeah, I love the idea here that if it's used correctly, then will I see Steve McQueen in a movie again?
Well, right now, George Carlin is doing a comedy special with two people who didn't get the permission of George Carlin's family, but they've got a deep fake of George Carlin doing some comedy again. And so I think the problem is exactly what you just said, which is with the right controls in place. And I think that was what sort of, I think the solution to this, to go off of one of my earlier comments, was AI and machine learning and all of these systems have not done a good job of tracing their sources. And there's good reasons for it. The current technology is correctly mashing all the sources together and letting the algorithm sort of synthesize what it wants to take from that. But if you could have the controls in place where we knew the sources, and the sources are legally controlled, copyrighted, you got permission, you got George Carlin's family's permission to do that, you got Steve McQueen's estate's permission to do that, I think it's interesting. I think it's kind of ghoulish, and I kind of think, why can't we find new talent? And why can't we find, I mean, that's another thing going on in this world, is the consolidation of entertainment and creativity. We haven't had a new movie star like Tom Cruise, and that's why we're forcing Tom Cruise to still jump off buildings in his 60s. But I do think there's interesting applications if all of the things are in place. I think a number of actors would look at this and say, that's horrifying. He's dead. It's good that people die. New things come out of that. People can be inspired by Steve McQueen and go and perform their own unique ways, but someone trying to make Steve McQueen do something new, it's like that Elvis song that got released in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was kind of weird. What's up next? I think we've got the Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, Microsoft Teams now has Mesh.
Mesh, which is already an overloaded word, and they decided to add yet a third scenario to it.
Yeah, but I think it actually plays really well into my thinking because, like, obviously, I'm a big data mesh guy, but I do use the term API mesh and information mesh as well because I think the mesh is the important piece of all of those, right? But you can switch out. So I think the Microsoft mesh is the information mesh, right? It's the experience mesh. A Microsoft phone maybe starts to look different in the future with the Microsoft mesh, where all of my communication can be boiled into this one network, right? Now a Microsoft phone starts to look a little bit differently, I think. Yeah, so yeah, the mesh, it's going to introduce 3D and VR. So MetaQuest VR devices are going to be natively supported in Teams going forward.
So for people who don't know what that means, it kind of looks like, if you remember the when was it? When did Zuck roll out Meta as the new branding? But when Zuck rolled out Meta as the new branding for Facebook, he had that weird little demo where they were floating half bodies in a meeting room talking to each other, and that was the new virtual world that Meta was going to be arguing for. That is what this new Microsoft Teams mesh capability is if you have those headsets, then you will have the meeting in Teams in this virtual space, and they've got a whole bunch of tools. I mean, it's Microsoft. They're great at creating developer tools and supporting a thing with customization, so you have all of these controls, it looks like, to go and fully make your little VR environment whatever business-friendly space you want it to be. Put up your company logo, put up a banner, put up the slides, the video talking about the new release. It's going to be a whole virtual world inside Microsoft Teams, which no one actually has the headsets for yet, but I guess they're trying to. I mean, this is the thing about Microsoft too, that's Microsoft's been really great in the past, is the reason no one in the 90s and early 2000s on the hardware side complained is because Microsoft's entire goal with Windows is it would work with any hardware. And so the hardware companies loved it. So I would imagine there's a similar thing here, which is there's hardware partnerships that they're trying to push VR headsets, and now they have the software to make corporations want to consider that even more.
We don't need a big corporation to go in there to set precedents, right? The Accenture, I believe, it had to be 2 or 3 years ago. I think they were touting how they purchased 60,000 Meta, and this before they were called Meta. I think that was 21, right, when they rebranded. But Accenture bought 60,000 for onboarding and training purposes for their staff. So there's already big commitment from some big corporations. And I believe it's Katie Gerrity, I think I'm pronouncing it right, who's like the global head of onboarding at Accenture. Sort of her quote was, you learn things on the slide where it can be boring. And we thought, what better way to actually immerse new joiners in our purpose than in this virtual space, right? This meta space for Accenture. And I just fundamentally, at the core of me, agree. Sure, I can fly a bunch of people in from out of town, and that is 100% effective, hopefully, if they're smart people and the meetings are good meetings.
Right.
The video call to do the same thing, if I was to put a measure on it of effectiveness, right, I think is down in the single or low double digits. Actually doing in VR, again, providing the meeting is structured well, for me takes us back up to the 70 to 80% effectiveness range for the human connection, the spatial audio, the visual of your mouth moving, me taking those visual cues. It's really subtle things. Like when I talk to people, I can stare into space and focus on a building while I'm thinking about a point. And all of these little subtleties are lost in video conference that you start to bring back up again in VR. So I'm super excited.
I'm just not convinced. How do I want to say this? I think, yes, it is 100%. Well, I won't say 100%. It is most effective, but plenty of companies screw this up. But it is most effective in person. There's actual in person signals and ways that works best. I think it's in the single digits when it's over video and everyone's in their house. But my problem with this is it's actually a step backwards on the human connection part to me, because it's not my face, it's my avatar that I picked. And so I now need to remember, well, Greener went with the slightly tanner than he actually is avatar, and all of these things that are these avatars that they're doing. I think maybe there's a version of this which in 5, 10, some future state in which it's a camera on your machine looking at you, binocular camera in 3D, and taking your actual appearance, and rather than putting you in front of a virtual background, is somehow putting you into the virtual space. But it's gonna be weird looking at Andrew's avatar, and corporations are gonna get real locked down with Melissa has blue hair and a shaved side of her head. Is she gonna be able to do that in her virtual avatar, depending on the type of corporation she works at? So I'm not actually looking at Melissa, I'm looking at what corporate has approved Melissa can look like for me.
Yeah.
We're not quite there. I don't mind the idea that you're talking about. I just don't think the technology is actually there. And I have to wear this giant headset on my head.
Yeah. So two things. One, the first time they were talking about 3D selfies sort of in the VR world was like back in 2016, right? So we're there from a concept point of view. So
Conceptually, but not hardware wise.
no, not hardware wise. But also, let's not forget when I say VR, I'm talking about all the R's. If Kevin's standing or sitting down in my living room and I'm getting that over the smart glasses instead, then I am seeing Kevin, right? I need for him to have the hardware on his side that can do the 3D rendering, or it's generating it through AI where it's Kevin's face, which is being 3D scanned, sitting on top of sort of his body, and it's connecting what he's saying and sort of re-rendering it to make it look like he's talking, which is what Zuckerberg did recently. Yeah, we're gonna have our choices. The virtual world, I think it's one of those things that you got to experience too. I've been working on different versions of friends and associates over the last couple of years, and like some it takes and some it doesn't. And here you bring up the clunky bit, the clunky headset. Absolutely, that is the big thing. But I attribute that to some of it is whiny humans, and then some of it is true. It is big and clunky. The whiny human bit is when they sort of kid themselves into, oh, I got to put the headset on. It's so much work. It's actually 45 seconds to get into a meeting, putting the headset on, starting the software, got the desktop agent, I'm in the meeting, right? Like I'm in. So there's a little bit of his human whininess where it's like, oh, my machine takes a long time to boot up. Like I really want it to be instant, so I'm never going to turn it off. And then some of it, yes, is clunky hardware, which will get better. But I still today, as somebody who does not enjoy working remote 100% of the time, I know I feel better when I'm in a room in VR talking to people about a common...
Even when they're weird little Nintendo Wii characters?
Yeah, it's funny because again, like it might be strange, but my kids talk to me like, oh, it's 60 FPS. I'm like, I didn't notice when it was 30. I didn't, right? Like
Sure.
I grew up on a black and white TV and like little portables where we were still trying to fix the aerial to get a better signal. I don't notice those things. Like if I'm in a room with an avatar having a conversation, and I guess that's sort of my MO in real life too, is like I like to think I'm not looking at people and making judgment calls on their size or their shape or this or that. I don't really care. It's only your mind and what you have to say I actually care about. I'm looking from a cost saving perspective, right? Like if I can get the team together twice a year, it's still tens of thousands of dollars, right? Flying those people
Sure.
in, the hotel costs. But for a one-time cost of whatever it is, let's say it's the Oculus 3, even the Pro version, let's push it out to 1,000. There's a one-time payment for that. For each of those people, I can do that same meeting 4, 5, 6 times throughout the year. So cost saving, and it's not the same as face-to-face, but it's more effective than video conferencing, right?
I don't think that's true now. I think that's true in 2030.
2030. Yeah, but we got to grow there, right? Like, how are you going to evolve to find out what's important in there if people are going to say, well, I'm not going to go in there till 2030? So some of us have to live in there today to say, yeah, this thing does not work in there. I have this conversation with a lot of them as I'm doing POCs, like, hey, your whiteboard is not as good as their whiteboard. I would never use your whiteboard because it's impossible for me to get up there with somebody and collaborate and rub stuff out on. And to me, nobody's nailed the virtual space yet. Like I want something from all of them. Like one of them, I think it's Glue. They have the ability for 3D objects. And I sort of look at that as a foundation where, cool, in the future, as a data engineer, can I build a 3D pipeline pulling in whatever cloud cloud service components and I can watch data flow through, and I'm getting this visual of like my data flow pipeline. I think that's really a cool concept. I also think it just taps into your creative self more. I'm more expressive. I've got arms in VR. I'm not waving my arms around in Zoom. Like, how do the Italians even do teleconferencing if they can't use their arms?
I'm clearly part Italian because I'm fully moving around in Zoom meetings, but that's all right.
Let's take it to the next level. Apple's Vision Pro, soon to come out. I got to find a way to get
Where
it.
you can watch me blink through the headset. Yep, really helpful feature.
Okay. So I saw an example.
What? It's a ton of technology. It's a ton of technology that they've added to this headset where they have an outward-facing display. The entire purpose of the outward-facing display is to show your eyes, but your eyes are delayed because there's still a freaking delay in what they're showing you. It is the goofiest, weirdest expenditure of technology I think I've seen in a while.
We didn't even get to the good bit, right? Like all of that seems like immaterial when we get
I'll
to the
edit
good
that
bit.
to the end. I'll edit that to the end of
Yeah.
the...
I saw the example for anybody. I'm sure our listeners have seen it. The Formula One
We can
example.
include the link.
Yeah.
We'll include the link in the show.
Yeah, we'll include the link. And it's the Formula One playing on the TV, but actually through the Vision Pro, it's actually built a 3D rendering of the track, and I'm now watching real time the cars all over the track, right? I'm able to
So it's
get statistics.
It's AR. It's augmented reality.
Augmented
by
reality.
Projecting this 3D thing into your living room, onto the coffee table, or wherever.
Absolutely. And that is just one, it's just the beginning, but two, it's not a hard leap to think about what else is there in the first year. Now I can watch a 3D football game. I can
He means soccer for American listeners.
Yeah, and then for the 12 people who still like American football, they can watch that, right? There's not going to be a great deal of money in that, but you can watch that baseball fly through the sky in your living room out of the stadium.
I do think augmented reality is the more of the interesting. I don't want to go into a meeting room. I'm not in an office for a reason. The idea of Microsoft Mesh has zero interest to me. I don't think that the in-person versus video is that drastic of a difference in my experience, and so that's not the selling point. The augmented reality is super interesting to me. I think that's actually kind of interesting. I think the way back in the day was it Halo 2 that had the ARG, the game, the I Love Bees. I think I Love Bees was the Halo 2 ARG, was promoting Halo, and you went to like actual physical locations and they had to actually put physical things in the location for people to find. I think, God, I don't remember, that was like 2004 or something. And I think, Pokemon Go was the first really good example of that, where you could take advantage of the real world and have people go to actual places and get the benefit of, they didn't need to go actually put an actual Pokemon thing anywhere. They could digitally decide where they wanted these things to show up. And I do think there's a ton of interesting applications for education and activities and getting fit and all of these things. There's really cool applications for that. And then sure, being able to see the F1 track on your coffee table. I don't know that I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm convinced that the full immersive does for me what AR does. I think AR to me is much more interesting.
I understand what you're saying, but I think there's enough people that maybe aren't as sensitive to us that do get immersive. So I think it'll be interesting. I think the thing you've consistently pointed out, which I will never agree with, is the clunkiness.
Yeah.
That has to change. Even though my headset looks awesome. It looks like, it does. I mean, mine, it's got the full on, I got the battery on the headset and everything. It's not like just out of the box meta. So mine looks awesome. I look like Master Chief.
And then 8 hours later of having to use it all day for your white collar job, and now your neck has a crick in it.
Actually, the other day, Isabel came home and I had the red lines around my face of where the headset was. So when she sort of asked me what I'd been doing and I was like working, I was sort of a giveaway. So I gotta find a way of also not having her listen to this episode.
Right.
But that is a problem, yes. But I do spend at least, when I'm in VR mode, I will spend at least 3 to 4 hours in there a day.
And again, if it was like the glasses I'm wearing, if they just touched my face on either side and were this lightweight, and I don't know, like I don't mind some of these concepts, they don't work for me in the current hardware. And again, that's me. I'm not trying to say that has to be for everybody.
What's next? This one's controversial. The next subject is super controversial.
Why is it controversial? You keep saying that.
Because why is it so hard to land on the moon now than it was 50 years ago? And you know who's going to be listening and saying, see, you know who that pulls out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the title of this section would be Stricken Japanese Moon Mission Landed on Its Nose, right? Which is, I actually... I actually find it quite humorous. Like
I mean, it's a cute little photo of
it
this poor
it
little thing
it
tipped on its side,
is.
and when you're looking at it, you're like, "Oh, that's adorable little spacecraft."
Yeah, it's like
Good
what
thing
is
there were
it?
no people inside.
It's like the little train that almost could,
Right.
which is a cute.
And his two little soccer balls that he shot out and are taking the photo, which is a really cool part of the mission, by the way. They launched two little soccer ball sized things that went off and like took the photo. That's how we know what it looks like. There's an actual photo of the thing from the little soccer ball. That's so cute.
But do you think, as they realize this thing has landed on its nose, there's sort of part of the team are thinking, "I hope the footballs fail, so we don't get
Exactly,
this."
exactly. So we don't get the photo of our failure.
Yeah, it would have been like, "Hey, can you guys shut down the footballs?" Nope, they've already gone.
No, what a shame.
So the Slim Lander, I guess they're saying it may yet come back to life if they can get the solar cells to work.
Well, that was my question. So, okay, so what happened? Like, how did it end up on its
I
side?
believe it was an abnormality in the main engine, and it affected the landing altitude of the spacecraft. I think one of the thrusters, from what I can gather, there's a couple of there's two big thrusters, and SLIM stands for Smart Lander for Investigating Moon, which is an unusual name. It's always
Cute.
doomed after that. One of them failed on the descent, so obviously tipping the thing.
Okay. But then what I thought was weird is they only had solar panels. Like, because if you look at the photo, we can include the link in the show notes. You look at the photo, and this thing is a little, not quite a hexagon, but like it's a little shaped, not quite a cone. Like it's just this little lander. Think of the moon landing lander, but more boxy, I guess. And it landed on its side, and they're saying that that's the side that the solar panels are on. And I'm like, can we go back to the design where you put the solar panels on one of the 6 sides? Like, why aren't there solar panels on other places? And now they're waiting for the sun to hit it at the right angle at 2 p.m. on Friday, and that's going to hopefully be enough for them to do. And are they going to be able to, like, do they have side thrusters? They're going to be able to, like, try to stand it back up, and then they're going to overcorrect and it's going to land on its other side. Like,
That's
what's
what I was
going
gonna
on?
say. Is that it's almost like there's a team that are laughed at and like we're not gonna need you guys, and their whole responsibility is to have these 2 arms or 4 arms, one on each side, which is like, hey, if for some reason we land upside down, these arms will just sort of push against the surface of the moon.
Let's make sure we don't turtle, right?
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
it. It's the turtle feature, and it's going to bring the thing back around,
Right.
and then everybody's going to be looking at that team like, it's good job we have you, and they're going to be totally going to be the heroes, right? And it doesn't seem to have that.
Exactly.
Which, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, maybe they could have planned for solar panels and things in different areas, but I'm guessing at the point where it lands upside down, they're just kind of like,
Right? We couldn't have anticipated it would do a full 180, although it doesn't even look like it did a 180, but still, yeah, it's weird. I am curious I want to be in that after action, that post-mortem to understand what was going
but
on.
let's go there. Let's go to the controversial question. The people who deny we ever landed on the moon. So now they've got to feel really refueled in their argument, right? They're going to be thinking to themselves,
That the Japanese decided to send a fake mission to the moon and publicize it, and that the Japanese government, the society who is, whether it's stereotypical or not, the perception globally of Japan is an honor-based system. And so what the Japanese government decided to do was dishonor themselves with a fake botched moon landing. Real brilliant stroke of genius there, Gary.
it's actually so all of that will be fueled by the conspiracy theorists. They'll actually argue that why is it that one nation that values honor above all else is forced to publicly admit this, and they will use that to fuel the whole conspiracy of that's because we've never been there, and what better way to make us believe that we have been there than using the one country that places honor above all else having to embarrass themselves online. It's the same theory as those guys who, when they're doing the fake call out from work, they use something very embarrassing to call out sick because they think to themselves, oh, no one would ever admit to having the runs when they call in sick, so they have to believe me, right? They must believe I'm sick. I would never tell an embarrassing story about me having the runs. It's the same thing. These guys will, I guarantee you, it will fuel their argument that we've never been to the moon.
I guess I shouldn't try to apply logic to how I think a conspiracy theorist would come up with. But why did anyone think Japan had a space program? Like, I know they go up onto the ISU a lot, but I wouldn't have assumed that, not ISU, the International Space Station, the ISS. But I like the fact that Japan decided to go to the moon at all. Why would you? That's a bizarre. That's a sure. Of course, the Illuminati and the one world government is secretly using a fake Japan mission to convince you that the moon landings are possible and real, and then they decide to botch it again. Crazy.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's still evolving because we've often seen with the American space program, right? The failures or what they thought was going to be a failure. Actually, they find a way to work within the parameters. So it's like I got to assume
Yeah.
there's atmospheric sensors and things like that where it's like, yeah, and the football's taking pictures. I got to assume there's something still functioning on the craft, right? That's of use.
I mean, if a thruster fails and you fall, I suppose the gravity on the moon is less, but you still fall however many tens, hundreds. Like, when did it fail that it's able to fall on its side? That's a pretty significant impact for a thing that is, in the case of the moon landing for the US, that thing was like millimeters of foil keeping them safe from the vacuum of space. Those things tend to be kind of fragile. I'll be curious to see what they can do with that thing. But yes, surprisingly, somehow these systems tend to be able to repair themselves, unless it's that time that NASA calculated half the chip in meters and half the chip in feet and crash right into Mars. But other than that,
Yeah, well, they learned something. They learned something valuable, right? In that, which is feet.
yes, the imperial system sucks. Everyone should switch to metric.
Exactly. Back to the fingers and toes. So yeah, that's the story, and we'll see. But I'm pretty sure Reddit's lit up. I'm pretty sure Twitter's lit up with the "we never went to the moon" and it's all evidence, because if we can't do it now with all the technology
Sure.
we have, then we couldn't have done it then either with the technology that we didn't have.
Yeah. I think that's another one where I want to read. I mean, we're probably not going to get the bug report for another 5 years or something, but it would be really interesting to figure out what goes wrong. Is it a hardware failure? Is it a calculation failure? Because that's, orbital mechanics are, you can claim we didn't go to the moon. Do those people also think we didn't take a photo of Pluto? Because the crazy math that these guys are able to accomplish and get stuff done is really impressive. The ability to calculate the Voyager is going to leave at a certain time, slingshot around Jupiter, correctly arrive at Saturn to take really good photos. Like, the math involved is crazy and cool.
It is, and actually, just to give the listeners sort of an idea, JAXA is only the 5th national space agency to actually touch down, right? A soft touchdown. Granted, it's upside down or on its nose, but
So the US, USSR, China,
India.
India. Oh, they did the water survey a couple
Yep.
years ago, right?
So,
Yeah.
so statistically, it's incredibly difficult to do this. They did actually land on the moon. That is an accomplishment.
Right.
It's just, I won't say the glass is half empty or glass is half full. The glass is upside down, but there is still water in the glass.
Technically, when the glass is 50% air and 50% water, it is 100% full. You sound like the episode of The West Wing where Leo is trying to convince the president to support the missile defense shield, and he describes how the test passed 9 of the 10 criteria, and the president's like, what was the 10th criteria? Actually defending the country from the missile. And he's like, oh, so close, just that one thing. If that one thing wasn't a requirement, if the missile defense shield didn't have to defend us from missiles, then we would have passed the criteria successfully. We did technically touch down on the moon.
Yeah, but it's like you said, until the report comes out of what went wrong, they might have learned a lot, right?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
They could have.
Well, and also one of the things that no one ever really talks about in space travel is things like microasteroids that are tiny, like rice-sized pieces of rock that are flying around the solar system, and those things pierce at 26,000 miles an hour. That's, who knows what went wrong in those kinds of things.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that too. Is like, it's really difficult because whenever I'm on a plane, I'm acutely aware of the fact that cars break down, motorcycles break down, trains break down,
Sure.
planes break down, right? But there's also a lot of gunk floating around in places too, right? Like obviously not at the tens of thousands of feet. I don't expect to get a bird flock, but on the way down and on the way up, I am constantly thinking about those pesky birds, right? When you land on the moon, I'm pretty sure there's a chance you're gonna hit that odd space bird.
Yep, nope, absolutely.
Flopping around.
Those are common issues for the Apollo missions.
That piece of rock floating around, or like the movie. There was Sandra Bullock. Is that her name? With the
Gravity.
Gravity.
Yeah, that's a horrifying. Yeah, I bet actually Gravity would be one that would be good on a VR headset because you don't need much immersion. You would get the immersion comes from. I saw Gravity on an IMAX screen and it was nauseating.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, so that was an interesting one.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. If you liked what you heard, maybe go and drop 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a nice review. And if you didn't like what you heard, remember the name of the podcast is Jordan Jesse Go. And also tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it. And a friendly reminder that we are always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, for our segment User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with an engineering or product team member, trying to figure out how to solve an agile process problem, or you just can't understand why your favorite app updated everything and it's now terrible. We're here to talk it through with you. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord and the User Stories channel, and we might be able to help out on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up shit-talking a coworker or something. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the one we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. You can also follow us on most apps. We're at acceptancepod, and we'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there. We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptancecriteria and on Discord. You can find links to both in the show notes and on the blog. And I promise we'll be moderating the crap out of them to keep it a nice little slice of the internet. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at ktomasuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.